Hello everyone. Tonight, I have a horror story from a hospital in New York that's both chilling and heartwarming at the same time. By the end, it's bound to bring tears to your eyes. I cried while writing it. This is a true story, so I ask you to listen all the way through and give it a like to show your support for a brave nurse and her deeply compassionate act that will truly move you to tears. Nurses like her, and many others just like her, live among us. They deserve our support. Working nights at Brookdale Hospital in Brownsville hits different than any other medical job I've had. The fluorescent lights buzz a little louder here. The shadows in empty corridors stretch a little longer, and every shift brings stories that stick with you. But nothing prepared me for that October night. I was doing my usual rounds in the labor ward, checking on two sleeping mothers who had just given birth. The maternity wing was quiet, too quiet for a Friday night in Brooklyn, the kind of quiet that makes you notice things. The rhythmic beeping of monitors, the squeak of my worn-out sneakers on linoleum floors, the autumn wind rattling old window frames. Our break room was my next stop. My colleague, Sarah, was fighting with our ancient coffee machine again when her phone lit up. "Jennifer, ER's sending someone up," she said, her face growing serious. 20-something. High-risk situation. Way too early. That last part made my stomach twist. In our job, way too early never means anything good. They arrived like a storm hitting shore. The girl couldn't have been more than 22. Had track marks up her arms and pupils like pinpoints. Her boyfriend was worse. Tall, lanky guy named Tom, who couldn't stop moving, couldn't stop checking this black duffel bag he carried. You see a lot of addiction cases in Brownsville, but something about these two was off. Not just regular substance user off, something else entirely. The girl's contractions were coming fast, too fast. While Sarah prepped the delivery room, I tried getting basic information. The girl wouldn't answer anything directly, kept looking at Tom, then at that bag, then back at Tom. He paced the room like a caged animal, knuckles white around the duffel's handle. I've learned to read people in this job. You have to. And everything about this situation was screaming that there was more going on than just another sad case of addiction. The way they whispered to each other when they thought we weren't looking. How the girl's eyes kept darting to the door like she was planning an escape route. The way Tom flinched every time someone walked past in the hallway. Dr. Martinez arrived just as things started escalating. The girl's vitals were all over the place, and Tom's agitation was getting worse by the minute. I remember thinking, as I watched him grip that duffel bag tighter, that some nights in the hospital show you the best of humanity, and some nights show you something else entirely. Everything happened too fast after that. Dr. Martinez barely had time to put on his gloves before the girl started screaming. Not the usual labor screams we're used to. These were different, raw, primal. Tom jumped at every sound she made, his eyes constantly moving between her and that black duffel bag in the corner. The girl was losing it, thrashing around on the bed. Sarah tried to hold her hand, but she yanked it away, yelling something about needing her medicine. Tom stepped forward like he was going to grab the bag, but Dr. Martinez's voice stopped him. "Sir, you need to stay where you are." I've never heard the doc use that tone before. He must have sensed something was off too. The monitors were going crazy, heart rates all over the place, both mom and baby. I kept my eyes on those numbers while prepping the warming station. 22 weeks. That number kept flashing in my mind. Too soon. Way too soon. Through all the chaos, I noticed Tom's behavior getting more erratic. His hands were shaking, and sweat was pouring down his face. The girl kept calling his name between contractions, but he wasn't looking at her anymore. His eyes were fixed on that bag, like it was some kind of lifeline. When it happened, it was like watching a scene from one of those medical shows in slow motion. The tiny form emerged, so small it could fit in my palm. The room went quiet, that heavy kind of quiet that feels like it's pressing against your ears. Dr. Martinez worked quickly, efficiently, while Sarah and I moved through our practiced routine. Following protocol for these situations, I wrapped the little one in our softest blanket. The tiny chest was moving, small, shallow movements that made my heart ache. This is always the hardest part of our job, but we have procedures, ways to help parents cope. I turned to Tom, holding his child with gentle arms. "Would you like to hold your baby?" Those words changed everything. Tom's face. I'll never forget that expression. Pure panic mixed with something else, something wild and desperate. He lunged for the duffel bag, knocking over a tray of instruments. The crash echoed through the delivery room like a gunshot. "We gotta go," he shouted, grabbing the bag. "We gotta go right now." The girl started screaming again, but not from pain this time. "The bag! Don't leave me! The bag!" She tried to get up, blood still flowing, monitors beeping warnings that everyone ignored. Tom was already running. His footsteps echoed down the hallway as he disappeared. The girl was hysterical now, trying to rip out her IV. "I need my medicine. It's in the bag. Let me go." Sarah tried reasoning with her while I stood there, still holding the tiny bundle. Everything was falling apart. Dr. Martinez called for restraints, but before they arrived, the girl had already signed the release forms with shaking hands. She could barely stand, but she was determined to leave. "Mom, please," I tried one last time. "You're not stable. You're still bleeding." She wasn't listening. Her eyes were wild, focused on the door where Tom had disappeared. 20 minutes after giving birth, she stumbled out of our unit, and there I stood, in the sudden silence, holding a tiny life that deserved so much better than this. Sarah started making calls. Security, social services, the usual protocol. Dr. Martinez stood at the nurse's station, filling out incident reports. Everyone doing their job, following procedures, trying to make sense of what just happened. But I couldn't move. The tiny bundle in my arms felt impossibly light, yet somehow heavier than anything I'd ever carried. The gentle rise and fall of that small chest continued, each breath a miracle and a heartbreak wrapped into one. Looking down at that innocent face, something broke inside me. Both parents had abandoned their child in pursuit of that black bag. Here was this tiny soul, brought into the world too soon, now completely alone. At 22 weeks, we all knew there was nothing medical science could do, but I couldn't bear the thought of this little one spending their final moments under cold fluorescent lights, with no one to hold them. no one to care. The parents might have chosen their addiction over their child, but I could still offer what they couldn't: simple human comfort. Sometimes being human has to matter more than following protocol. I approached the nurse's station. "I'm taking my break now," I announced. Sarah looked up from her phone, her eyes soft with understanding. She knew what I was going to do without me having to explain. That's the thing about nurses who've worked together long enough. Sometimes words aren't necessary. The breastfeeding room was quiet, lit only by the soft glow of night lights. It's usually a place of new beginnings, where mothers bond with their babies. Tonight, it would serve a different purpose. I settled into the most comfortable rocking chair, the one we reserve for mothers recovering from C-sections. Carefully, I adjusted my scrub top and placed the tiny form against my skin. Skin-to-skin contact. It's something we always encourage parents to do. Studies show it helps regulate body temperature, heartbeat, breathing. But really, it's about connection, about not being alone. I started humming, an old lullaby my grandmother used to sing. Outside, the city continued its nighttime symphony of sirens and subway rumbles. But in our little bubble, time seemed to slow down. Each breath we shared felt precious, sacred. The hospital's night shift moved on around us. Somewhere down the hall, another mother was probably welcoming her baby into the world. Life's cycles don't stop, even when your world feels frozen in a moment. 45 minutes. That's how long we sat there together. I counted each breath, each tiny movement. When the final moment came, it was peaceful, like watching someone drift off to sleep. No machines beeping an alarm, no dramatic measures. Just a gentle transition, wrapped in warmth and love. Later, filling out the paperwork, my hands trembled slightly. The parents never returned. People often ask how we do this job, how we handle the emotional weight of it all. The truth is, it's not about handling it. It's about letting it change you, about recognizing that sometimes the most important medical skill isn't in your training or your certifications. Sometimes it's just about being there, about choosing to be present in someone's hardest moments. I still think about that night, especially during my quiet shifts when the city sleeps. And I know that somewhere out there, a tiny soul touched this world for just 45 minutes. But in that time, they were never alone. Sometimes, that's the most human gift we can give.